everyone, welcome back to the Long Lens Podcast. This is a podcast where I answer questions from my filmmaking community, and I just talk about filmmaking and YouTube, and sometimes I have guests on this podcast. And today's guest, we have my buddy Tim Newman. So Tim, you're a lifestyle and wedding photographer mostly, but you also do a little bit of video, and something that I think is kind of unique about like the work that you do is that you are a really big stock photographer. So in today's episode, I kind of just wanted to talk a little bit about the different streams of revenue that you've been able to make work throughout the years, but like also kind of talk about like what goes into creating a really good stock portfolio, because you do photos and videos.
Yeah, for reals. Well, I got started at iStock pretty much because I met a couple of people who were older than me who were doing it and doing it really well. And really the driving force to this day has always been having inspiration, like individuals who inspire me with the stock photo community. And I always thought, well, if they can do it, I can do it too. So that's kind of been my driving force since the get-go.
So talk to me a little bit about like, where did you find the most success on like stock photos? Because I know there's a bunch of different stock photo websites, but like I've known you for a while, and so I already know this, but like, just like tell my audience, like where did you post stock photos and like where did you find the most success?
Basically, I started with iStock. Pretty much when you start at any stock photo agency, you're not bound by a contract to be exclusive to that one company. But I wanted to be that because the perks seemed appealing to me since the beginning. So I think in my first or second year of shooting stock, and by the way, that was like 2010, I think. So by 2011, for sure, I was exclusive with iStock. Exclusive just means that you're only selling with iStock and their partner or sister companies, which would be like Getty Images, who owns iStock, and a few other, I can't remember the ones below iStock, but they have three or four different tiers of companies that, you know, they sell under. There's a lot of different avenues that you can do. Like some people swear by uploading to multiple stock sites. There's apps and programs you can submit, you know, your photo to, and it goes to multiple stock sites. But I've found the most success for me with exclusivity with iStock and Getty Images. Part of that is because I've felt like they treat me well there. I felt like I'm recognized and my work is being appreciated there. How I got there, I don't really know. You know, just I guess consistency, maybe knowing a few people for a long time there has helped too.
Who were some of the people that you knew that like, because I know that you were talking about a lot of other photographers that kind of like influenced you and encouraged you to do it. Who were some of those?
One of the main guys his name is Ryan Lane. He pretty much pioneered these style of photos that are very unique and took off with a lot of success for him. He pioneered these like nerdy selfie stock photos, which basically are just really extravagant, really over the top kind of self-portraits that he started creating. I don't know where his inspiration came from, but we actually shared a studio together way back in like 2011, 2012 here in Portland. So I actually got to work with him and learn how he does that, how he lights those photos, how he manages to take them with just a tripod and a timer. So I applied that to some of my earlier stock photography, and it actually took off pretty good for me, just doing like kind of the nerdy self-portraits. I think that might be a little dated now. I don't know if that really is a trend that people are really searching for anymore.
What's crazy is that like you may have seen Tim in a stock photo that someone on like some commentary YouTube channel has made, because there's a lot. It's like if you search nerd on like just like on Google, you'll probably find pictures of Tim. And it's so crazy because sometimes
I just want to chime in and say that my wife's cousin who lives out of the country messaged us a couple of years ago. She's like, my wife's name is Aida. She's like, Aida, is Tim on this YouTube like channel? This it's actually a Cartoon Network show called The World of Gumball or The World of Gumball or whatever. So they actually purchased a stock photo of me, and basically the premise of the clip was a character on this Cartoon Network show was searching on a computer for like nerdy profiles or whatever, and they slapped my picture over on the, and no joke though. So a few years back, I had a friend who was traveling in like Kentucky or somewhere, in the Southeast. And she posted a photo of me on her Facebook. It was, she found my photo. Well, it was my it was my face, but my friend Ryan took the picture, so he got the credit. But it was on a card, like a greeting card at Walmart. So it was like she was like, "Oh, hey, I found Tim in the card section at Walmart."
But that's the funny thing too, is that like, since you're selling stock photography, like you're selling the rights basically to that photo for anyone that wants to pay the money. They can use that photo for like whatever. And the crazy thing is that like I was just driving down like 112th or something, and I saw a picture of your wife up on a billboard. You know, it's just like, oh, there's Aida. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's the second time I've found a billboard with my photo on it in Portland, and yeah, it's wild. It's like, but you want to know the even crazier thing, and this might lead to another segment of our conversation, but you want to know how much I made off that billboard picture?
No.
Like $4.
Oh my God.
And the first billboard incident where like a different picture of my wife was used on a billboard from stock photography, I made like $15. So barely even enough to buy her like a hamburger lunch, you know, like, so you might be like, oh my gosh, $4 and $15 for a billboard. Like that's nothing. And you're right. It's kind of not very much money, but I think the key is having a large volume of quality content that sells regularly.
Yeah. That's actually the next question I was going to ask you, is that like, how lucrative is the stock photo industry? Because for just a little context, me and Tim used to be roommates. And so we talked a lot about this stuff. He kind of like opened my eyes to like the world of stock photos and videos. But back when I was living with you, I feel like it was a pretty lucrative thing. I don't know if like, times have changed a little bit, but like you were just doing stock photos, some weddings thrown here and there, but like how lucrative is it in like 2024?
Yeah, that's a great question. So basically across the board, I'll just give kind of vague figures. Since I started, and my first paycheck was in 2010, about 6 months after uploading pictures. Since then till now, I've made over 6 figures. And I would say more than half of that was in the last 2 years, around 50K in the last, or thereabouts in the last 2 years. But every year before that, it kind of like was growing, but slowly. So I would say like, don't have big expectations right at the get-go. It takes a lot of time to get up to those kind of numbers. The first full calendar year was 2010 that I was doing stock photos. And I think my whole year that year was like $2,000. Okay. It wasn't very much. But hey, I mean, if $2,000 on the side of what you're already doing, that could be a nice vacation. That could be, for a lot of people, $2,000 in addition to what they're already doing could be something.
I've tried stock photos and I do stock video a little bit too. And that's just something that like, I keep having to remind myself that like, it's a very slow burn process, like you have a huge portfolio now of like, of photos. And the only reason that like you're making as much as you do now is because you have that huge portfolio. I think a lot of people get into stock photos or videos and they just expect these huge numbers the first year that they do it. And it's like, they only have like 100 images up there, but like, it takes like a long time to build up your portfolio, right?
Yeah. Well, let me share some insights about like the types of photos that I've found that sell. So basically, pictures of people often sell better than pictures without people. Sometimes there's a little bit of leeway and wiggle room to that statement where, a picture of an object that's an everyday use object that someone might use every day, like, I don't know, a coffee pot full of coffee or part of a car, like a tire or something. Those might sell more than just like a field of grass. But going back to people, I found that photos of people sell almost incredibly way over more than pictures without people. You've got to get a model release from them to be able to use their image on a stock photo site. In
the beginning, I'm guessing that like, stock photos was just kind of like a little side hustle that you were doing. What are like some of the other things that you did with photography work? Because I feel like for the most part, as long as I've known you, you've always been a photographer primarily, like you've had, I mean, like we both have had like some, some side jobs that are just kind of like, means to an end type of things. But I feel like for the most part, you've been a photographer. So what are the other avenues that you've gone down?
I've done real estate photography, both shooting the photos and editing them. I've done a lot of weddings. Right now, I kind of market myself as a lifestyle stock photographer, like you mentioned, and a wedding primarily, with the addition of like family and portrait sessions. Yeah, basically photography has been like my whole career. I mean, started that in high school pretty much, and it's taken off. Aside from a few, oddball jobs that I've had, like you said, just to make ends meet, I don't really feel those are a part of my career necessarily. Yeah. Like, to be honest, right now is the slow season of photography. The last few months of iStock have been a little bit slower, just due to I don't know why they've been slower, but they have. So I've been door dashing a little bit on the side and got to provide for those kiddos, you know?
That's right. And that's one thing that I think a lot of people, some people don't want to like have to do that, you know? They'll go and they'll take like the worst photography jobs ever that'll just like stress them out so much just to say that like, oh, I'm still doing photography work. Whereas like, I feel like it'd be a lot less stressful of a situation if you just like door dashed or, you know, got a part-time job somewhere or something like that, where it's just like your creative energy isn't completely depleted, and like when things start to pick back up again, you're just like, you know, all gung-ho for it.
Basically, the way I've made photography work for me as a career is not sticking to just one type of photography. I feel like if you do that, you've got to be like the elite top to like, if you're only doing weddings, you have to be, you know, booking 20 to 40 weddings a year at like $3 or $4 a piece to be like sustainable. And I don't know a lot of photographers, at least now in 2024, that are booking that many weddings. I know wedding photography is a big part of my like annual percentage of what I do under the umbrella of photography. But, you know, like stock photos make up a little bit more than 50%. The rest falls under like weddings, and I would categorize it as miscellaneous, like real estate, product photography, headshots, that kind of stuff.
Something that I was going to kind of like, you know, transition to is like something that you've been doing more of is stock video. And that's something that like me, and I'm sure a lot of my listeners are probably interested in, because this is a filmmaking podcast, and I'm sure a lot of people are shooting video. You know, I'm sure you probably wouldn't consider yourself a filmmaker of sorts, but you do sell stock video as well. Like, how has that been like transitioning as a photographer into starting to shoot video?
Well, at least I can say I've got my foot in the door in video, because I heard a wise photographer say recently that if you don't do any video in 2024, you're going to kind of fall behind and be left in the dust. And so even though I wouldn't say I don't have the skill set or knowledge necessarily to produce like a commercial for a company or a really nice YouTube promotional video for someone, like that's your forte. I think the stock video clips, it's literally like 5 to 10 to 20-second clips of whatever. You're not necessarily splicing and cutting up multiple shots, putting them together and putting music and audio together. Pretty much the video for iStock is non-edited, like non-color corrected, doesn't have audio. They want video that an editor or someone that's buying on behalf of a company to use for an ad or something can color correct to the tone of their own video.
Yeah. You know, I've tried to build up my stock video portfolio a little bit, and I haven't really seen that much success. But again, I have a very small library right now. But what do you think, like in your experience, what has sold the best as far as stock video goes?
So that's a great question. I have one video clip. The camera is handheld and it's pointed up towards the sky, shot at nighttime when it's snowing. So I was actually standing next to some street lamps, and so the snow light is illuminated, and it's a pretty simple video. I think the clip is 6 or 7 seconds long, and it's simply just, you know, handheld video clip of snow falling. Yeah. I'm not sure why that's taken off, because like I said earlier, usually content with people sells more, but that's been downloaded probably close to 70 times and made a couple $100 off that. So 2 years ago, I bought a Canon R6 because prior to that, I had a camera that wasn't shooting 4K video, and I needed that to do certain projects with iStock. And I think since I bought the camera in like the end of 2022, I've made back the investment on the camera. Okay. in just video sales. And I use the camera probably like 10% for video, 90% for photos.
Okay. Yeah, that was going to be my next question, is like what gear you're shooting with. But you have a Canon R6 now, and have you invested in any of the RF lenses?
No, so the way I have some tried and true Canon EF-L series lenses, which are like my bread and butter. The RF lenses look really nice, especially the ones that do, in my opinion, do something that no EF lenses can do at all. Yeah. And there's two that catch my eye. It would be, well, for video, it would probably be the newly announced RF 24 to 105 f2.8 IS, and there's like a Z in the title, which I guess means for like video zoom automatically. It's crazy. Look it up. It's a sweet lens. It's hella expensive. I don't know. I'm going to have to sell a lot more stock videos to be able to afford it.
Yeah. So what's your lens kit right now? Because I know that like you came from a 5D Mark III, which was like your workhorse. And then you had, or you still have a 1D.
Yeah, an older 1DS Mark III, which I recommend for photos. It doesn't have any video capability, so it's kind of out.
Before we get into like your whole lens kit, when it comes, let's say someone wants to sell stock photos, like, do they absolutely need the highest end camera, or can they get away with like an old 1D or like a 5D Mark II or something?
Yeah, and there's so many good older tried and true DSLRs. I mean, from every company out there. I'm just going to talk on Canon because that's what I've used all these years. But like a used 5D Mark II, 5D Mark III, or even the older 1DS series, like those are all super solid cameras. I think like the 1DS was like the flagship back a long time ago in like 2008. Yeah. And you can get them for like $600 now used. So honestly, you don't need the newest, fanciest, mirrorless, flashiest gear. You can start out with like a $500 camera.
You kind of, I mean, do you find that the EF lenses work like decently well on the RF bodies?
I do. So I've learned something. Any EF lens that has the version or Mark II of it actually can shoot at a higher frame rate for like stills, like continuous photo mode than like a first edition EF lens. Now I know that because I have the only version 2 lens I have is the Canon EF 24-70 f2.8 2, and that like when I pop that on, I can shoot like, you know, full like whatever it does, 12 or 20 frames per second. But if I pop on like the 50 f1.2L, it reduces the speed of the shutter a little bit. Not like the shutter speed, but like
the autofocus capability?
Well, a little bit the autofocus, but more just like the amount of frames per second you can take in photo mode. I looked it up. It's confirmed. I don't know why it did that. I didn't know that when I bought the camera, but it honestly wouldn't steer me away from buying an R6 Mark I and using older EF lenses with it. The whole kit, I have a lot of lenses that sometimes my wife uses, sometimes I use, but the 4 that are like my kind of like my all around do or die lenses for everything would be like the EF 17-40 f4, the 24-70 f2.8 L version 2, the 50 1.2, and the 135 f2L.
I'm pretty sure I borrowed that from you once, and it's just such a creamy looking
lens.
my
gosh, yeah, I love it. Cracking open a sparkling water from Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's actually has the best flavored water. I mean, like LaCroix is LaCrap, man. My dad was like a musician and audio engineer. He asked me if I wanted to help him one summer when I was like 14 or whatever, and his boss was cool with it. So I was like setting up stages for like concerts and stuff. I would say like audio engineering and like live sound was more a part of my career, if you will, than like a few other oddball jobs like DoorDash, or I think Nigel and I both worked at a daycare a long time ago. And I was like, I got it because work in photography was low. And then when work with photography was picking up, I was like, all right, I don't really want to be doing this no more. So peace.
With every job that I've had other than, you know, like video work, every other job I had is always just a means to an end. Like I've never gotten a job where it's just like, this is going to be my career. I'm going to stick with it for like years. Every single job I've had is just like, if I lose it, I don't really care, you know, because I know that like this isn't what I want to do.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just kind of like popcorn. My brain's like popcorn right now. I'm like getting pieces of information about that can be applicable to your viewers, but like it's coming in random spurts. Okay. Yeah. One of the things that I think has helped me be mostly sustainable as a photography for 15 plus years has been, now I'm not trying to like talk highly of myself. I'm just saying having a good work ethic and like being an honest person when it comes to pricing, business, you know, the work you do, the prices you charge, the quality of your work, that carries you a long way, your reputation. Yeah. And then being like pretty consistent in a certain location for a long time has a big effect too, because people I went to high school with, I mean, that was a long time ago. I'm going to be 31 this year, but it's like a dude I went to high school with just hit me up last summer. Like, hey, can I get photos of me and my wife and my dog? And I was like, sure, man. Yeah. So it's like having, not to say moving around is bad. Like, That's awesome. I actually honestly wish I could move around a little bit more, but being like rooted in one area, I think has really helped me have a stable presence in the photography community, as well as branding. It's like when people say my name, Tim Newman, I want them to think of, oh, Tim Newman's a photographer. Tim Newman does photos. If I need photos, I can go to Tim Newman.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your photography inspirations, because you talked about a Ryan Lane who kind of like influenced you to get into like the stock photo aspect of it. But who are some of your other influences in like the photography space?
That's a great question. A guy named Kevin Russ. I'll just go to where most people might know him from, is Instagram. Yeah. But Kevin Russ was one of the first people out there to like really travel with and document everything with just an iPhone. Yeah. So starting in 2012, I think, which was really in the early days of Instagram. Let me give a little context. He was a big time iStock photographer, and I think his workflow was he was doing so many photo shoots and having so many uploads to iStock, which took so much of his time, that he just was like, I want to go travel and like see other things, which is a great mindset to be in. Yeah. So he just like road trips in his car and takes all these beautiful landscapes and wildlife photography with just an iPhone. And I'm not talking like iPhone 14 Plus, Pro, Max.
He was doing it with like an iPhone 4.
iPhone 4, yeah. 4S, 5, 5S, whatever. And this dude would like go to all the national parks, go to like just the beautifulest small towns in like Western America. His work is just timeless. Yeah. It's classic. And if you don't know his work, go check him out on Instagram. It's at Kevin Russ.
And you kind of know him personally, right? Like you know him on like a personal level too.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I know Ryan Lane more, but like basically like the motivation now has shifted a little bit from like individual base, like looking at people and being like, wow, I want to aspire to be that. Now it's like the drive is knowing that my rent is paid, knowing that there's food on the table and gas in the tank. Basically, I mean, I love those people. I love those guys, Kevin Russ, Ryan Lane. Now my motivation is like, you know, looking at my kids and just trying to provide for their needs, you know?
So going forward, I know you talked about your goals to kind of get more into like the business space, because I know that like, I mean, you know, we're both in our 30s now, and something that I'm kind of thinking about is that like, I know I could probably, you know, I do YouTube for like a decent amount of time, but am I really going to be doing this when I'm 50 years old? Am I going to be making like YouTube videos when I'm 50? So I'm just curious, like, what are you trying to do in the future to help, you know, propel your career to the next level, I guess?
Visual assets will never go out of date or out of style. That said, I don't know where the world of AI is taking us. Some people fear it. Some people embrace it. Visual assets will always be, there'll always be a market for those. I'm pretty settled in like that photography and visual assets is my career. I doubt I'm going to go to be like, I don't know, a banker or a firefighter when I'm like 50 or whatever. Yeah. But the way I was talking about how if you're not adapting to do some sort of video, you're going to kind of be left in the dust.
No, well, I feel like you've always been pretty good at like figuring out different ways to make money, even if they're weird. I remember when you were, you know, collecting Polaroids.
Can we talk a little bit about that?
Well, okay, I just have to give a little bit of context, because I feel like for most people, this isn't really something that like you would even think is possible. But when I was like roommating with Tim, he didn't have a normal job and I did. I worked for Parks and Rec. And, you know, I'd go to work every day and come back and I'd be like, okay, Tim never works. How does he make money? And then I would see him just collecting all these Polaroids in his room, just like
Polaroid cameras.
And I was like, what are you doing? And then he basically explained what he was doing.
I learned from a guy that he owned my photo studio. I rented from him and he told me how to hustle. One of the assets we were hustling were Polaroid cameras. I would go out and find the cameras, buy them, sell them for a big profit, and I would do it in bulk to a company. Actually, some photographers and videographers might know of the Impossible Project. They repurpose or remake Polaroid film, right? Polaroid 600 film, whatever, for those instant cameras. I don't know what they were doing with them, and I don't care, but they were paying me. So, like, the deal is I would go to multiple Goodwills around Portland, specifically one in particular that I would frequently go to all the time, and I got it down to a science where I knew which days of the week they would put out Polaroid cameras on the shelf. I knew which times of the days they would do it, and I would almost fight people for them. like, oh, not seriously, like, but like, there's this kind of energy. I don't know if it's still there, but there's this energy when you go to like the grungy Goodwills, especially like the Goodwill bins, where people are just kind of like, you know, kind of passive aggressively elbowing people to get their stuff. So there was kind of some of that, but there was also like, if they put out 9 Polaroids, I'm going to take them. Yeah. And I'm like, they sell them for like $5 a piece. So you're dropping like 30, 40 bucks or whatever as an investment. The Impossible Project would buy them from me for at bare minimum $28 a piece. So that's like, I don't know, like you're flipping these cameras for like a bunch of money. And when you sell them 50 cameras a month, this is a no-brainer. Nobody's doing it. Like,
I feel like living with you for that time kind of like switched my mindset. I was like, oh, wow, there's a lot of different ways that I can be making money. Like, I don't have to go and work and trade time for money. I can just hustle and just find other ways to make money.
And I know it's such a hard thing. Okay, it's such a hard thing to like wrap your mind around, but it's like there's an old lady around my block, or like around the house I live in, having like a yard sale. She's selling a Game Boy Advanced, and this was like the newest model at the time, for $5 with games, with accessories. I'm like, shit, bro, like this is a hustle right here. And I was probably 8 or 9 years old. Like, this is crazy talk, but like I bought that thing, sold it for like $85 that day on Craigslist. Nice. And like my parents were just like, who is this kid of ours? He's selling this thing for like a profit. Like, what's a 9-year-old gonna do with $85? Like, buy groceries for the family? Like, what the heck, man?
Well, I mean, I have a story that I remember when I was living with you, and we would go skate all the time because, I mean, like a little bit of context is me and Tim used to live in the same house that was owned by a skate ministry called Skate Church. And so we'd live at the same house. And since we had pretty cheap rent and we had work that we did, but like we had a lot of downtime to just go and skate. And so we'd skate together a lot. And I remember just like one time you found like a crusty bagel like outside of like a restaurant or something like that, and you hadn't eaten that day. And it's not like you were poor, you were making more money than I was, and you were just like, I'm gonna eat this. And I was like, what are you doing? It's like, every day is a hustle.
Oh my gosh, I hope my wife doesn't see this podcast, bro. That's so funny. Every day is a hustle, man. Selling Game Boys, selling Polaroids, selling digital photo assets. I mean, digital photo assets is the more distinguished.
And I feel like it's the best return on investment too, because like they go up and then like, you know, you take a photo and you post it there and it can sell 100 times. You know what I mean?
So that's kind of going back to what I said about like having different umbrellas or avenues or branches of your business to make money from. Unless you're making like, sheesh, a lot of money doing weddings or stock photos, it's probably, in my experience, better to have different hustles, if you will, to make that. So like,
yeah, that's something that like I think like a lot of creators, you know, whether they're photographers or filmmakers, they get stuck in this mindset where it's just like, I have to do this one thing, but they don't realize that like there's other things in the creative sphere that you can do to make money. I feel like you've been able to figure out different ways to make being a freelancer work without having to like resort to like, you know, doing a whole bunch of, I guess, creative work that just kind of drains you. Because that's a pretty big subject right now, is like, you know, creative burnout with people. They become wedding photographers and then they book 100 weddings in a year, and then they're so burnt out at the end of the year they quit, you know?
Yeah, like I don't want to do more than 10 weddings a year. 10 might even be pushing it. Mm-hmm. I think I've got 3 weddings booked for this year and a 4th one that's a staged stock photo shoot. So be sure to check that out after May 9th when I'm shooting it. Yeah, 3 right now, and then hopefully a couple more. But because what I really want to be doing is more of the iStock stuff. And the last 2 years have been my dream. Like, you know, the highest paying month I've ever had was $5,000 with iStock, and that was last year. The lowest was actually probably last month, which was like $900. Yeah. And so it fluctuates a ton, but I would, you know, that's my dream, is just to be stable with it and sell enough that the good months are really good and be able to put some money aside for the slow months like I just had.
If you could give some advice to your younger self, you know, something that you wish you would have done sooner or differently, what would that be?
You just got to believe in yourself. Just kidding. I told it to my dog when she barks at the mailman. All right, so if I had advice to give to myself, my younger self, it would probably be like, don't be afraid to try new things. I was really hesitant to launch into the video realm of stock content, but it's worked out better than I think I expected it to. So keep your mind open to like not boxing yourself in to be like, I'm a wedding photographer or I'm a maternity photographer or I'm a family photographer. Like, it's okay to do more things. It's okay to be a jack of all trade and a master of none. Like,
Jack of all trades is a master of none, but far better than a master of one.
you can just call me Master Jack.
So where can people go to find you on like Instagram and a website maybe?
Probably my local 7-Eleven. My Instagram, my business Instagram is at Tim Newman Photo. And I have a link on there to my Getty Images and iStock portfolio. And then furthermore, if you want to see like portraits and weddings and like my freelance photography, my website is www.timnewman.net.
Well, thanks, Tim. I appreciate you hopping on here and sharing a little bit of the freelance career that you've had being a photographer and a video creator. So
yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Long Lens Podcast. If you'd like to, you can leave a rating on this podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And tune in next time. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you all later.